went away and I did my research on this particular drug, and it's used to sedate some of the world's most violent criminals in the Canadian prisons. And I thought, okay, so that's being used for these prisoners, and you want me to give this to my 7-year-old daughter. And at that point, I made a decision that we would stop, as it said, and I was also going to share my story and write my book so I could share with mamas what we'd gone through.
Oh, you guys know that I like to rock the boat a little bit. So here you go. I have Susy Parker on today, who is talking about all of the gifts that she has learned and received from her child being diagnosed with ADHD, oppositional defiance disorder, and having anxiety. Whoa. And she was only 7. Actually, she was 6 at the time of the diagnoses of all of these things. Her whole entire journey of being handed what she said was a bouquet of darkness, how to understand how to work through the process of working in a very kind of sterile medical field of just simple and quite robust medication, what the side effects were that she dealt with her daughter, and how she's come to an equilibrium of understanding the benefit of both Western and Eastern, both traditional and non-traditional practices of helping her daughter thrive with those diagnoses. This is such an interesting podcast, and I would like to just preface it with those are personal opinions on this podcast, and always please refer to a properly trained medical professional, and also please always align with your own intuition. This is such an interesting podcast, such an eye-opening podcast, such an honest podcast of, I think sometimes a diagnosis of ADHD that can be quite negative, and even in society, sometimes we have kind of negative connotations or perceptions of children and adults with this diagnosis. And I just think what she talks about is so beautiful. And I hope that it serves you or maybe helps you understand the process more. And please make sure that you share it with somebody who might be journeying in this path with themselves or with their children. Enjoy. So hello, Susy. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks, Nish. How are you?
Good. I love our little Instagram friendship. That is just so fun.
It's great, isn't it?
I know. We haven't even met in person yet, but we are next weekend. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, I can't wait. So excited.
I actually reached out to you because I started stalking you on Instagram and was like, I love this girl. I love what you're not a girl, you're a woman. I love what you're bringing to the table. And I also love how approachable you are in your journey. So I brought you on because I want to talk about interesting stuff in this podcast. And I think it's really interesting about your journey with ADHD with your oldest kiddo, Sarah, and also the revelation that you have ADHD as well through that process. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And also what that's brought into you of kind of sieving through what you've been told is the appropriate way to deal with it, being intuitive in your own motherhood to figure out, okay, so what's the traditional, what's the non-traditional, how am I going to incorporate this in? And then helping your daughter kind of come into her own. So I would love for you, Susy, just to say a little bit about what you do right now, and then maybe we can talk about your journey and how you got there.
Okay, Mish. So I am an author and blogger. I wrote a book called Saving Sarah, Learning to Live, Love and Laugh with ADHD. And that was published last year. I blog as well, so I'm always writing about positive ADHD and changing the conversation about ADHD into a more positive one, which I'm so passionate about. I have a podcast called The ADHD Mama, and I have an essential oils business, and most recently I've started a sisterhood membership online as well to really bring in that community of mums all across the world. So yeah.
So awesome. I love how you said positive ADHD. Right? Because every time I've ever heard of ADHD, it's it's the kid that's, has so much energy or is bouncing off the walls. It's kind of how do we contain them? How do we make them so that they can be quiet and not so, I guess the word might even be crazy or busy or this or that. How do we manage all of this? So talk to me about your journey with your daughter, Sarah, and kind of how what were the kind of triggers or the red flags as she was growing up? And maybe talk about how the whole diagnosis process and what you've kind of come to intuitively as a mom.
Okay, so we always knew that she was different. From 13 months old, we started to notice a difference when she started to walk just after her first birthday. And but even before that, I probably noticed around 6 months when we would go to all these little baby classes where, the babies would sit and they'd have to cut their hands, and she was just different. She had places to go, people to see, and things to do, even at 6 months old. So going then through nursery and school, I was always the mum that was called in. Your daughter's bitten someone, she's hit someone, she's run away. It was just constant. And then what really triggered it, I think, is the move to Australia when she was 6 years old. So I thought, kids are really resilient. We're always told that. She'll be fine. She's only 6. And she wasn't. The move, the leaving school, friends and family triggered her so much that we just were at a stage where we just didn't know what to do. We had a toddler and a baby as well. And as a mom, I felt also, I think, leaving all my, best friends and family, and I felt completely lost. So the funny thing about Australia is in the UK, you would just talk to your friends. You're going to have a cup of tea and you talk about your kids or your husband that's annoying you, whatever. I found here very quickly that it was, we'll just go and see a psychologist. I was like, really? Is that what we do? And they said, yeah, a mum that I'd just met sort of said, I know this play therapist. She'll play with Saren, and then she'll be assessed. And that happened quite quickly. And we were given a diagnosis. We kind of went in and sat down, and straight away it was, your daughter has ADHD, but she's at the extreme end. She also has extreme anxiety. And my advice to you is that you need to medicate her with Ritalin straight away. And it was just like, what? And it happened very quickly. And then she handed me a book and some information about ADHD. And I left that day feeling really broken, because I think the way it had been delivered in this big negative bouquet, if you like, it was nothing nice about it at all. It was very dark, and you've got problems and this is going to be a rough road. So then from there, all the information that I read that was given to me was completely negative. Looking at the diagnosis that comes with everything we know about the hyperactivity, the distractibility, everything was just so negative. When I Googled it, it was all gloomy as well. And so as a mom, I think I just felt straight away, oh no, this is really bad. And I felt very, very negative about that. And there was this stigma, I couldn't find anything positive about it, only negative, which then came fear, self-doubt, failure. Oh, failure was huge. Oh my goodness, I have. And also, Misha, as well, I had this belief system that ADHD, if a kid had ADHD, it's because the parents didn't know how to parent them.
Wow.
That just happens to the parents that don't really care about their kids. As awful as that sounds, that's what I thought. Or maybe they're feeding their kids Coke for breakfast or whatever, Coca-Cola. I just always had this very negative view of it. So I resonate with so many mums how they are feeling, because you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to tell anybody. You certainly don't feel proud and empowered, and you feel quite broken and quite embarrassed about it.
I think what you said is really interesting, right? Like, not only do you feel like, because your daughter would have been 6 or 7, and you're thinking,
yeah,
how did I miss this? Or how did this, why wasn't this diagnosed earlier? Or especially, I think, Google's so good, but then Google can be so bad, right? Yeah. I'll often say to coaching clients, Google this, but don't start catastrophizing. But how can you not when you're, you're in a brand new country, you've got no support system around you. You go to a play therapist and they just hand down this diagnosis. And then all of the pre-constructed schema of reference of what you knew about it. I even just told you something I just said, the crazy kid, the energetic kid, the one that can't sit down, all of those kind of negative things that we have, even as a former educator, right? You just think, wait a second, is that true? That's not what I see with my daughter. And it would be a lot. So how did you start then? So you had this huge upheaval. It's really dark. You're super overwhelmed. You've just moved here. You've got 2 younger kiddos. You pretty much are just kind of so is it Ritalin or what do we do? So what did you start doing? What was your game plan?
Okay, so the psychologist suggested that we would see a pediatrician because she couldn't speak to us about the medication. So that's what we did. And that was a really interesting journey as well, because we saw the pediatrician for 45 minutes. He saw Saren for 2. He weighed her, he said hello, and then that was it. And then she went back to play in reception. And he then diagnosed her with ADHD as well and said, I recommend, the same as the psychologist, that you medicate her straight away with Ritalin. So I said, well, look, is there anything else? Is there anything we try as a parenting, or is there any supplement, anything natural? And he said, no, the best the best course of action is medication. And then we can look at the other stuff next. So first of all, we have to sort the behavior out. So I left there feeling pretty broken because I was in a situation like so many mums where we didn't know how to manage our daughter at that time. So she was that crazy kid, miss. She was just all over the place, crazy, running away, losing her daily, which I laugh now, is so bad, really. And the school would phone me every day and say, we don't know what to do with this child. Like, we have no idea what we're doing with this child. So we took the decision to medicate. And then my personality is I can do something, but then I stop and think, oh no. So we started the medication, and whilst it was good, it didn't sit well with me. So we did have this very compliant, calm child. And I think for about 3 days we tried it and I just couldn't do it. So I stopped it. And then I went on this mission of trying everything natural, even at one point pond water. Poor kid. And not like I didn't go to the pond and take it out myself. It was all nicely packaged, but anything to try and help her. And that didn't work. And we found ourselves then going back to the medication, which we did on and off. She was given medication for anxiety, and she wasn't on Ritalin for a long time, actually, in quite a short time. But because she was diagnosed with something as well called oppositional defiance disorder, she was medicated for that. So I think in total, probably medicated for around a year on and off. And then I just got to a point in my life where it just wasn't sitting well with me because we were seeing the side effects. So even though we had this compliant child, the school loved her, you know, she was amazing at home, I could see side effects from the medication and I couldn't ignore them. So that's when.
So what were the main side effects that you saw for your daughter that you couldn't ignore?
Okay, so the stimulant medication brought on extreme anxiety. Like they said, she had anxiety, but this was nothing compared to what happened to her on the medication. So then she was medicated for the anxiety, right? Because that's what they do. There's a side effect, they put something else in. And then, but she also developed, it's interesting you ask, because I don't often talk about this, it's in my book, but what happened with her is she started to get an obsession with death. So this is a 7-year-old child who's constantly talking about what would it be like if I died? What would it be like if I, you know, it was very scary. If I died today, how would you feel?
Wow.
Became obsessed with knives and just wanting to talk about them all the time and look at them all the time. And when I spoke to the experts about it, they said, it's nothing to do, because I said, I've researched this. These are some of the side effects. And they said, it's nothing, though. It's not the side effects. It's just she's trying to cause attention for herself. She just wants you to notice her. She's just playing the game. But so I kept a diary every day of everything that happened, every side effect, every, the good stuff, the bad stuff, which became the book actually. But I knew on my heart that I felt it was the medication. She also developed a tic from the stimulant medication. And then they tried a different medication for her oppositional defiance disorder, because that got worse with the medication, which was supposed to support anxiety and ADHD. And then the medication for the oppositional defiance disorder, she was on that for about 6 weeks, maybe less, and she started to go through what is known as promiscuous puberty. So it's when she started to get spots, she started to get her boobs swelled, only a small bit, and she started to get dark hairs on her legs. And again, I did my research and I found out that this medication can bring on promiscuous puberty. And if I continued it...
Is it called promiscuous puberty?
Promiscuous puberty, yeah. It's the early onset of puberty brought on by medication. And it's huge and it's happening all over and it's not talked about. So it's actually fantastic to talk about it today.
Sorry, I just need to take a minute to
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's huge.
What's the actual?
I know. Yeah. And the thing
I've never even heard of that.
Yes. So it's, I don't think many mums have. Because this became my hyper focus and I researched everything about this particular medication, which is a well-known medication used here in Australia for children as well. And I know there's a lot of cases in America where it's happening to boys and they're starting to develop boobs. So it's pretty huge.
So not only, okay, yeah, continue on. I won't get my soapbox. Continue on.
Yeah. So at that point,
this is why I love this podcast, because I'm like, I want to get the renegades on here. Yeah. Let's talk about the really hard stuff.
And to be fair, the pediatrician at the time was honest enough to say, you know what, you're right. She is getting those side effects and we need to take her off it straight away. And he offered me another one, okay? And he gave me a handout which described this other medication. And then I got into the car and I read everything about this new medication that we were supposed to start for her. And it very clearly in bold said, this medication is not to be used for children under the age of 14 years old. He'd given this to me, which is the irony. Bold, big, do not give kind of thing to children under 14. And she was 7. So I knew at that moment, Mish, that that was the end for me. And I could not go along this medical path anymore. I could not listen to the experts because everything they were saying to me just didn't feel right. And I went away and I did my research on this particular drug, and it's used to sedate some of the world's most violent criminals in the Canadian prisons. And I thought, okay, so that's being used for these prisoners, and you want me to give this to my 7-year-old daughter. And at that point, I made a decision that we would stop, as I'd said, and I was also going to share my story and write my book so I could share with mamas what we'd gone through.
So fascinating to me. Like, I mean, we could probably talk about this for days and weeks and years. And I'm totally not against the medical system. I mean, I work in it. I'm a registered nurse. Like, I'm totally for when medication needs to run its line, but holy smokes. Yeah. Like, you know, and as a mom, you know, sometimes like even like there's choices that we've made that buck the system. Like I went and talked to a doctor yesterday and was like, actually, we're not doing that. You know, actually, we're going to wait 6 months to do that, or it's not really important to me for that. And I think the thing that you're saying and that I'm hearing is that there is an intuitive connection as a mother to our child. And sometimes it takes a whole bucket load of bravery to stand up and say, that actually isn't working for us. Or, you know, the Ritalin works, but I want it in a less dose, or it's going to be in conjunction with this, or we're going to try this differently, or actually I'm not giving that to her. Or, you know, it's about a conversation. It's like proactive, conscious healthcare where we need to look at the whole picture, the whole person, and decide, is that decision natural or non-natural, synthetic or non-synthetic, the right decision for me? And that is a really important conversation. We cannot just say, I'm not going to listen to anything that the doctors have to say. I'm going to listen to everything that doctors have to say, or the medical profession. It's a conversation, an intuitive connection. And I think we're losing that as parents.
Yeah.
You know, we're losing that of saying, that actually doesn't feel right to me, or this school isn't the best fit for her, or that medication isn't the best. And then being able to be courageous enough and brave enough to say, we're doing something else.
Absolutely. And the thing is that, you know, I always say, I've been writing and blogging for the last couple of years and really sharing about all of this story, but I always say to mums as well that I'm not against medication at all, because there's so many beautiful mums that I connect with all over the world that have chosen to medicate their children, and for them it's working.
Yeah,
and I always say, the thing is, what I've always said is, if it's working for you, then amen to that.
Yeah, totally.
Working for your child and it feels right to you and your child and everything's okay. But if it's not, this is when we really need to start looking at alternatives, because what I found with Saren is that when it didn't work, there was something else. And then when that didn't work, it was something else. And we went on this merry-go-round of all these different medications.
Yeah.
And that's what I really passionate about at the moment, about teaching mums to really look deep into their children, because we're often the experts, nothing against them. I connect with so many different psychologists and doctors, and I think they're amazing and they're doing wonderful things. But I also think that often we're not looking past what we see.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah, we're not looking, what are they deficient in? You know, let's take some blood tests, let's take some hair samples, let's take some poo tests, you know. I couldn't think of the...
stool. Do they call it a stool sample?
Stool sample.
Just have them poop in a cup. It's actually really interesting that you say that, because so much of what our body is, you know, sometimes like when we're acting out and stuff, like even with our daughter, right? Like, so she's allergic. Well, she's not like anaphylactic, but she reacts to eggs and corn. And what was interesting to me is I was looking back at our time in the US, like I tried to be super diligent with her with corn, but they put corn syrup in everything. Like there's corn syrup in everything in America, even Panadol, or what they would call Tylenol. There's corn syrup in that.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right? And
there's so much research on corn syrup that's just like, it's not great. It's not a great thing to have in large doses. And she was like having all of these issues with like anxiety when we were there, like being super clingy to me, like almost like laying up, like she'd almost want to koala on me. And then she was just doing these random like power chucks, you know, like we were in the car and she'd just spew. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? You know? And I think it was an energetic thing where she was uncomfortable, but it was also a food thing. And so we can't, with exactly what you're saying, is like, let's not just look at one or the other. Let's just not say no medication or all medication. Let's look at it like a holistic, like, okay, are they deficient in zinc or calcium or magnesium or potassium or whatever? Are they allergic to something that you don't, or are they sensitive to something that you don't know? Like it could just be something really simple like corn or milk. But the interesting thing about this too is it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of bravery. And unfortunately, it takes a lot of money, right? To do all this like testing and naturopath and stuff like that. But it's a commitment I think we have to do as mothers to say, this is my child and I will do whatever I can. So you started then, you got in the car, said nothing under 14, and you said no. So what did you guys then do? What was your next step?
So our next step was just to then, I'd sort of dabbled with the holistic stuff. I'd been to see a naturopath. We'd had tests, but I almost just wanted to, if I can remember now, get back to basics, you know. And we had, you know, one thing you're saying there, Misha, about the naturopath and all of that is very expensive. But as well, certainly here in Australia and the US, going down the conventional medical route is expensive as well. You know, it's huge. You see some of the pediatricians and you're there half an hour and it's, you know, $250 or whatever. So, but what I'm really trying to, or what I did, is I looked at just the basics. So we got a blood test, and what's so interesting is she was deficient in so many things, and she had a really good diet. I've since learned that she, like so many children, possibly have issues with the gut, and she wasn't able to take in the nutrients from the food.
Yeah.
She was also anemic, but we saw a very alternative doctor, and he sort of said, if you look at these levels of her ferritin, like her iron levels, they would be deemed as acceptable. However, I know that children cannot function on this, so we've got to get her iron up. And that was really interesting. He said, if you see some doctors, they'll say, oh, just get a bit of red meat in, whereas really she needed something more. So she had an iron infusion, and so did I. We did all of this together, so which was one of the things that kind of really bonded us together. And then her tick went overnight, which is so interesting because I know a lot of kids, especially a lot of boys, can start to develop ticks. And for us, it went within about 2 days. Then anything that she was deficient in, we got that in. So there was magnesium and zinc, vitamin B, D. There was a lot of vitamins that we needed to put into her just to get her levels up. We took out gluten and dairy, but not like super strict, you know, because that's stressful in itself.
It is, yeah. So
we just reduced as much gluten as we could.
And they're going to go to birthday parties, you know,
exactly.
Like, unless you're like, Anna, it is hard. I mean, exactly. We try to do the same thing too, but then I'm like, it's life.
Yeah, it is.
And the best that we can.
Yeah, exactly. So doing your best, and also back to basics. So really looking at like the diet that my grandma would have had and trying to give her that as much as I could. She's triggered.
It's so interesting too, like that, like we've gone away from like that high fat, you know, just basic, you know, meat and 3 veg kind of a diet, you know, where you actually make bread from scratch and you don't have a preservative in a bag and all of those type of things. I think I love what you're saying, Susie, because I feel like sometimes there's this push for natural, but it's like almost obsessive. Like it's an obsessive, like no additives, no preservatives, no gluten, no this, no that, only organic, only grass-fed, only this, only if they're, you know, like it just gets crazy. It becomes like another obsession. And I'm like that to me, yes, I would love my daughter to have a preservative natural diet, and we do the absolute best that we can. But I think what you're saying is like, hyper focus on the things that you absolutely can control and release the things that, like, you know, unless it's like anaphylaxis or it does cause like major issues, like just do the best that you can as parents. It's so important.
Exactly. And you know what, Mish, we did so many things as well. So we put together, so that was kind of like the diet kind of holistic supplement.
Yeah.
We use essential oils as well. Essential oils are huge for us. They've been really so supportive in helping Saren. But then also I worked on all the other stuff. So we looked at things like we had to go into her school and we had to have a really big honest chat with the school that what they were doing was not working and we needed to try something different. We also then looked at an easy reward chart. I'm all about making everything simple because life, as you say, gets so complicated. Women are busy. I made this really easy reward system, which I'm always sharing on my social media and my website about. It's called the pasta in the jar method. We did things like we let her, so interesting, we had to completely get our parenting books and everything we were taught by our parents and their parents and so on and so forth and throw it in the bin. Yeah. That's not going to work with this one. And we just had to almost allow her to just be who she wanted to be, which is difficult. And now it's easy because we've done it for so long. If she doesn't want to wear a coat, she doesn't wear it. If she doesn't want to wear shoes on a rainy day, she doesn't wear them. If she doesn't want to brush her hair, she doesn't brush her hair. And really getting over that. I know that a lot of mums that have different type of children, I speak to so many of them, myself included, are often women who like to control things.
Yeah.
There's that element of whether it's because you need to control things because of who you are or you want people to see you in a positive light. You know,
That's
want
exactly,
to turn up.
Yeah, I know.
You want to turn up with these beautiful little girls in dresses with pigtails because, hey, look, I'm a good mom. And I had to just go with the fact that I looked like I had a child who had just come off, a hippie camp. She just didn't look like she belonged. Yeah. But I had to let it go, that it wasn't about me. And if people would look at me and they, I had to let that go.
Totally. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much. And one of the things that I've had to really focus on with Ainsley is just like, I was raised, the baby's in their cot at, 6 weeks and they're in their bed at all times. They're in their room. They're never co-sleeping. They're never on the floor. They're like, a mattress doesn't work for us. And I tried to push her like in her cot and stay in your bed. And we'd have like these hour-long meltdowns like every single night because she just didn't feel comfortable in her bed. And so I was like, okay, fine. You can sleep on the floor in your room. You're 4 years old. I know that there's probably people in my family that think I'm nuts and probably in Andrea's family that think that we're nuts. But what you're giving your child is a really good sense of knowing what they intuitively need.
Yeah.
And what their boundaries are and how to speak up for themselves. And that to me is so important. If I give nothing more to my daughter than a real good sense of purpose and definition of who she is, then I feel like I've totally nailed it as parenting. And I think what you're saying is exactly true. Like when we want our children to look a certain way or act a certain way, it's actually less about them and more about us feeling guilt and shame.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And overall, when I look at everything we did now with, everything I've talked about, the main thing for me that really helped her was my connection with her.
I love that.
I didn't have one. I did not have one. And I also had my other little girl, Daisy, and my little boy, Flinny, he was like the cutest, easiest baby. Daisy was just the cutest, easiest toddler. And I knew that I was feeling more love to them. I knew I was doing it and I hated myself for it, but I didn't know how to stop it. And at first, my only connection with Seren really was when we'd go to all these appointments together, which is really sad. Like, we'd go to the appointments, we'd have the blood test together because I started to go through the fact that I probably had ADHD as well. So we would do the essential oils together and that connected us. And then it made me realize that I need to get this connection with this child because they're so intuitive as well, these children. And she felt that I didn't like her. It's a hard thing to say as a mum, but she could feel it. This 7-year-old child probably got more from the play therapist than she did with me. And I knew I had to fix that. And
how did you fix that?
So what we started to do is the reward system was all about keeping the pasta in the jar by Friday. And if she kept the pasta in the jar by Friday, it would mean time with me. So, and even on weeks when she'd been the worst kid ever, I would know that I had to do that with her, I couldn't ever take that away from her. And we would just hang out together. So even if we would just go out to the park or we'd maybe go out for a bit of breakfast or we'd just do little things together. But those things or even things like she was always very difficult to put to bed. So that would be difficult. And I stopped that and I thought, I've got to nurture her more. I've got to spend more time with her, lie with her, cuddle her, love her, just the basics that I felt like I'd stripped away for so long because I was parenting her, but I wasn't parenting her.
Yeah.
I wasn't being in the moment with her as parenting. I was just almost going through the motions.
Yeah.
And when I started to change that, and also my husband got on board with it as well, And they would have this little thing where, based on the pasta in the jar, over a couple of weeks, he would take her to the movies. And they started to build the connection up together. And she started to feel part of the family, because for so long, this little 7-year-old child would say, I'm not part of this family. And it breaks my heart when I think about it now. You love Daisy and Flinny more than you love me. You know, I'm not part of this family. And I would say, don't be silly. But I thought, she's right. And I know for so many mums, they struggle with that connection. And I always say, if you can get that connection with them and get that love back, you know, of course we love our children, but if we can start to really show them, their behavior will change almost overnight. It's quite amazing.
And isn't it interesting too, like how that connection, just listening to what you're saying, like that connection with her started when you decided to start having connection with yourself?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Right. Like, so yeah. I think oftentimes as women, especially if we were raised kind of in situations where there wasn't a ton of nurturing or emotional connection or intentional, like that cuddling and intentional space, that, I mean, I've even had to go on that journey too, where I've had, like, my connection with my daughter is so much stronger now that I have gone through, you know, eating disorder recovery and understanding how to connect. My connection with my husband is so much more intense now than it used to be, because I'm more open to giving and receiving love. Like, just even like the other day we went to the doctor and I was like, if you need to cry, you can cry. If you're scared, it's okay to be scared. Like, giving her permission to feel has only come because I've given myself permission to feel. And I think that's beautiful. And how awful would it be as a mom to think, I mean, basically your daughter was kind of dabbling with suicide and death.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so what I love what you're saying, like going back to basics and taking your life and stripping it down so that you're actually present and you're not doing a whole bunch of periphery stuff that just doesn't actually matter. It's so good. So where are you at now with the process? How are you guys going with Sarah and all of that? How is it now?
Oh, she's doing absolutely amazing. You know, one of the things I always say to mums as well, going back to what I was saying before, is let your child just take their lead. And I tried so hard over the years, Mish, to get her in, you know, get her in gymnastics, get her into swimming, get her into this, and she just didn't want to do it, you know.
Yeah, totally.
And now, because, so I just would, and the you know, my family would say, well, she must do that. She's signed up to do gymnastics. But I'm like, I have a different type of child here, you know. So, and for a long time, it felt like, oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just doing this parenting. I'm not doing everything that I was taught and what the books are saying. I'm letting this child pretty much do what she wants to do within reason.
Yeah,
you know?
Of course, yeah.
And I have no idea how this is going to work out. She's coming up 11. She is doing amazing. She's in everything. Now, I've always been one of those mums that doesn't want to push my children into lots of things because I want them to have a childhood. Yeah. This girl now is swimming. She's in gymnastics. She does acrobatics. She's a self-taught contortionist. And she does horse riding. And she's doing drama. And she's playing Puck in a play in a couple of weeks, in A Midsummer Night Dream. And she is happy. She has friends. She's doing really well in school. She's just doing amazing. And I look back now, and even the conversation having it with you now, and when I think back to where we were at 7, she's come on so well. But the main thing is that for her, she sees ADHD as a gift. And she sees it as a superpower. And for her, even the concept of anybody saying anything negative about ADHD, she would be so confused. She'd be like, what? What do you mean? Because to her, it's one of the most amazing things ever. And she knows who she is now. So she still has those moments that can come with anger outbursts and emotions and sensitivities, but she understands it now. She gets it and she can manage herself. And I think as well, one of the most incredible things what I've learned about ADHD is you have this resilience, and she has bucket loads of it. And to see her now, she's this very, very strong kid who knows what she wants. And I feel like for so long we tried to not actual beat, you know, just beat it out of her. Yeah. And now I think, you know, you hear about so many women who are scared now as women to be who they are, to speak their truth, to stand up for what they believe in. Yeah. And I think here's this child that she is going to be that person, and I don't ever want to change her. I want her to just flow into her life, being really confident in who she is, making a stand, making a difference in the world, because she has this resilience. So she just doesn't care what people think of her. It may change, I understand, with hormones and teenage years, but her very core is she just doesn't care what people think, and she just wants to live her very best life. And we're now helping and supporting her to do that. And I think it's amazing.
That's so awesome. I think ADHD or non-ADHD, that is what we need to be giving to our children, is a sense of total empowerment. I just, it takes people like you who are willing to renegade against the system or the conforms of what was told to you to do, to say, actually, no, this is not okay. And congratulations on creating a movement for so many women who, as a mom with the special needs kids, or they've got something that, isn't normal, it can be really lonely and really shame-filled. And it's only when we come into community where we can start to share our journeys and to lessen that burden and to put it across many shoulders that we realize that we're not alone and that we do have a lot more power together, especially as women.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, you have an online group called the Sisterhood with Susy Parker for parents with ADHD children. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And you also have a podcast as well.
Yeah, so I have the podcast, The ADHD Mama. That is getting really exciting at the moment. The interviews that I've had on there over the last few weeks with doctors and psychologists has just blown my mind. I've just spoken to someone who I connected with in New York called Peter Shankman. And he is a multimillionaire entrepreneur, keynote speaker, amazing guy with ADHD. And he thinks the same as me. It's a gift, not a curse. I've just interviewed him and I can't wait to share that. And also my whole intention with the podcast is to really interview people that think differently about ADHD.
Yeah, I love that.
Beautiful people who I'm going to be interviewing in a couple of weeks. One young lady that wants to share her story coming off medication from her whole childhood and now managing her ADHD through meditation and exercise. And I'm loving that. Loving hearing other people's stories. The Sisterhood, it's an online Facebook group called the Sisterhood Membership. And that was created only 3 weeks ago. But I found myself in a position where daily I was messaging people on social media and email and giving them advice. And all of it is the same. No matter whether their children have sensory processing or ASD or ADHD, or they think their child might have something, it all comes back to the same core values and the advice that I can give. So I started the Sisterhood Membership to connect women all across the world in a safe space, but also a really beautiful space with love and heart, because there's so many groups out there that aren't about that. They're about negativity and fear. And I wanted to bring mine into this beautiful space. So I have a live once a week, every Wednesday morning for about an hour. And I share everything that I've learned parenting a different type of child. And also I bring in experts for lives as well. And I go through, the mums will share with me things that are on their heart that they need support with. And we'll talk about that collectively in a community. And yeah, it's something I wanted to do for a while. And I just kind of felt, you know what, today's a good day. And I just started it about 3 weeks ago and I'm loving it.
That's so beautiful. So we can find all of that on your website. So what is your website again?
Yeah, my website is susyparker.com.
Perfect. And I'll send everyone there. And Susy, it is such a pleasure. I am so grateful for you. And you are going to be helping so many mamas on hopefully this podcast, or someone knows someone who's struggling. And I know that all we needed for women is like a hug and a permission to go kick ass. And that's what you're giving to so many women. So thank you for doing all that you've done.
Thanks, Mish. Thanks so much for having me. I've loved talking to you today.
Pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. If you'd like more information about myself, my journey, my public speaking engagements, or life coaching with me, please head to my website, mishpope.com. If you can kindly leave me a beautiful review on iTunes, I would be forever grateful. I can't wait to connect again in the next episode.